Wow, thank you guys. Thank you for coming. With the snow, and for many of you being civilians, you've never been on any of this. And so it's an experience in a lot of different ways. I wish my parents were here. Mrs. Nowakowski, you're like a mom. And so thank you for being here. As you see in the program, it's 30 years of paid Navy service. But 38, when you put together all the lives that I've interacted with, starting with high school, Scott, junior ROTC, it's amazing. And I'm not going to stand in front of this. It's amazing how fast it goes. So it just blows my mind to think that Scott, Romney, and unfortunately Dave and some others aren't here, but just what we had a chance to do in high school. And it all started because of a guy named Sean Fisk, just so you want to know how it started. So Sean Fisk in 8th grade, my cousin Chris and I were at Jack London High School, or junior high together, and he said, hey, when we go to high school, my brother does this Navy thing. It's kind of cool, he goes places, we should do that. I'm like, okay. And so, ended up in freshman year in high school, signed up for NJROTC. At first, my dad's like, what are you doing with the Navy? Why? But as soon as my parents came to the first parents meeting, they were on board. And so, it all began because of Sean Fisk, and then you start meeting folks like Scott and Paul Kokas. So Paul's over in Italy. Unlike my retirement date getting pushed a little bit, his orders to be here didn't work out. So it's typical Navy, I guess you could say. But that beginning of the Navy experience started there. And so, for our junior ROTC cadets, thank you for an outstanding color guard performance. One warning, if you have the weapon in your possession, do not let Scott touch it. It might disappear, or pieces thereof disappear. Just saying. So, and so began the career in high school where you just like, okay, you got to get a haircut. So my 8th grade picture had hair way down here, and next thing you know, it's a lot shorter like this, and it's never changed. It really has been the same haircut, a little bit high and tight at times, but whatever. But high school. And so that adventure began with drill team. There used to be a place called Glenview Naval Air Station. That's where President Bush learned to be a pilot. For a little memory, a little knowledge there. So that would be our first trips, visiting a P-3, which is a submarine hunting plane that we got to go on flights and occasionally throw up. They took us over there, taking us over to Pensacola, to Norfolk. They took us all over. And drill meets, it was wonderful with you guys. It really was. And little by little, you learned this thing we call maybe attention to detail. And so I surprised a few people because I know how to iron. Well, because I had to get my uniforms ready. And we learned to iron as we grew older back then, and got better at it. Put these uniforms on, and it's got to be a 1/4 inch here or a 1/2 inch there. And you have to learn all this stuff, and yet you're in high school running around like a knucklehead, and occasionally wearing your uniform in school. So that's really how it began, and you guys are my shipmates for life, so thank you for those experiences. Then comes college, checked out Michigan. I can honestly tell you I didn't check out Michigan, but Marquette won out, and I gotta say, it was Scott and our friend Paul were going to Marquette, and that's how that began. And I will say this, for all of us, life is never a straight path to where you want to go. There's twists and turns, and so I could tell you right off the bat to Vince's comments, I had a scholarship as an alternate, and all I had to do was survive the first semester with decent grade point average, and I would get the scholarship. Well, that didn't work out. So I basically got the $100 a month and loans and worked at Saga, schlepping food and washing dishes. And I worked through college. And that was, like I said, we all have a different path to where we got. And I got to tell you, it was tough, just getting through that. But at Marquette, now you're part of that program, and you're going to college, and then once a week you're wearing a uniform, you're going to Navy classes. A lot of fun, and obviously a little too much fun at the beginning, but I am a little bit stubborn. So I stuck it out, and and again, it was a little bit tough, so I had to take an extra semester, So I graduated in December, so that's why we're doing this in this lovely weather, by the way. So most people graduate in May. I was a December guy, but it works out. And then along the way, met Cheryl, and she got to experience a little bit of what Navy was about at that time. And we were blessed with Evan down, as time went on. And so I got my commission, and there's a special time there in December and up in Marquette. Matt, one of my college roommates, he was there, and Kevin Murray came a little bit. He came the second year I was there. So Kevin, another Marquette Navy guy, retired. So the Marquette phase, where we were Warriors officially, yes. The biggest mistake was they decided to come up with gold. That was the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. That lasted, I don't know, about 6 months, and then the alumni revolted, and they went back and changed it to Golden Eagles at least. So yes. So my ship. What was interesting about the Rushmore was I was on a commissioning crew. So most of the time you show up at a ship, it's there. This one was being built. So I was the 5th person to arrive, and so we were in San Diego together, and I got to take 28 Navy classes because there was nothing else to do because there's no ship. So occasionally we go ride other ships and that sort of thing. And I will tell you, one of the funniest classes I took was Harpoon. It's a missile system. And if you heard Vince's comment, an amphibious ship is it has some defensive properties and capabilities, but nothing offensive. The Marines are the offensive in that regard. But I took this Harpoon class. So you're sitting around the room, and at the beginning, and they introduce you, they say your name and what ship you're on, and here's so-and-so from this destroyer, here's Lieutenant so-and-so from a cruiser, and I'm Lieutenant J.G. Czarnik from the USS Rushmore. And they're like, they all look like, Rushmore, what is that? I'm like, well, it's an LSD. And they're like, why are you in this class? I said, so I can avoid the missiles hitting us. But eventually we went to New Orleans, that's where the ship was built, and is part of a commissioning crew. And so there's this whole time-honored tradition. When they launch a ship, they bust the bottle over the bow there, and there comes a point where now they get commissioned, and now we're officially a ship. We got 350 people overall, and so that's how the career began. And off to San Diego, we went through the Panama Canal, which I saw none of because my position when we were going through this very tight quarters was to be in the emergency steering room, which is about this tall. And all I know is I felt a bump, and then our brand new ship had a dent in it. It wasn't my fault. So I got that going for me. And then off to San Diego. And then you do the normal training and workups. So that's why one of the reasons we're here, training, okay? So the Navy, for those that aren't familiar with Great Lakes, it's a training base. So it's the only boot camp there's a boot camp on the other side, outside the gate that you came in. That's where all new sailors come from. And that's where they begin their training. When they graduate, some will go to their ships, but some will come to this side of the base. And as you can see, this is a bosun mate school. It's called an A school, just to give you a basic. So your first classes start as A school. So they learn your trade. So bosun mates are deckhands, right? They're the guys that work on the outside of the ship, whether it's putting the lines in when you're coming to shore or coming to port, rigging for underway replenishment. Sometimes we wish we had that. Like Kevin and I drove from Dallas, and we had to stop for gas. Well, ships don't have to. You never stop. You just plug in the hose next to another ship. So they learn their trade here. So this is the bosun mate school, and if you haven't had a chance, please wander around the ship. And then there's a thing called sea school, where you take your next level of training. So there are schools for guns, there's for combat systems, various schools here. So that's a little tidbit of this base, and it's been here since like 1900. So the big tower, that's a historical landmark, and it's a tower because it was there for water. Way back then they needed water. So there used to be a big old water tank inside it. So anyway, training, back on the ship, you start out by training with the people you work with. You've obviously got maintenance of all the equipment. I was in charge of auxiliary machinery. And the funniest thing was my second job, I went up to combat, where you have all the radars. So as you heard, Wheeling High School in District 214 is where we came from. So I went to Wheeling High School, and the chief that worked for me went to Buffalo Grove High School. Never met this guy, was never in Navy, ROTC, anything like that. But it began showing me how small this world can be. When you can all of a sudden be working with someone that was your rival high school. Heck, their quarterback threw me in the bushes once, like jawing off to Bob Devin. Remember Bob Devin? Well, he's a quarterback, who cares? So off, eventually we did our west pack, right? So we were in San Diego, so you go west. If you're in the Norfolk area, you're going east, up to the Mediterranean. And that's where we were just doing our usual thing, heading to the Gulf, because now the war in Iraq had already begun, but we couldn't go anywhere because the ship wasn't done, wasn't ready to go. And so as we're cruising along, one little sea story is I was the recreation's morale and welfare guy, which means I'm the guy that makes sure people have some fun. And so one of the things when we left San Diego, we always stopped in Hawaii just to get some additional supplies, etc. And I didn't get enough beer. So you can't have beer on the ship, you just can't drink it. And so I started ordering this pallet of beer. So we get to Hawaii, and and we're with 3 other amphibious ships. And so when you send it in your orders for whatever you need, it has to go through the senior ship. So they all know what you want and that sort of thing. But anyway, Hawaii didn't have it. So we get underway and we head off, and as we're approaching, and it takes a long time to get across the Pacific Ocean, I will tell you, well, at least a week. So that's like, all right, I need to order more beer. Try it again. Now we're gonna head to Okinawa. And so I put in my order, and they said, okay, we will deliver your beer, but we have a problem. Now there's a hurricane. And so now we had to work this out where we couldn't pull into port. So I just told the guys, I really want the beer. So basically, we anchored the ship off the coast. We got on a boat and went to this pier. There's nobody there except our pallet of beer. We load this beer on the boat and get the heck out of Dodge before that hurricane really hit. And all that beer goes in the brig, so it does not get consumed by anybody along the way. Because the way it works is you can't drink a beer unless you have not touched land for 55 days or more. Every other country in the world allows alcohol on their ships. My German buddy here is a testament to that. So anyway, and then off we went. And we stopped over in Malaysia, and we're supposed to help out Bangladesh because they were flooding again. Bangladesh is always flooding, but anyway, they turned out they didn't need our help, and we went off to the Gulf. Well, along comes this phone call or a message basically saying, instead of making a right to the Gulf, make a left. We want you to go to this place called Somalia. And so, okay, then we find out all the information about the UN and what's happening there, and we start preparing for this amphibious landing. And so we've got hovercraft, and we've got other kind of vehicles, but really it's the first time we've done an amphibious landing in decades. And so Chief Zemke and I from Buffalo Grove put all this training together that we really did and put this landing together. And I'll never forget, as we're cruising towards the coast, we're a couple miles off, and I'm sitting there with this radioman chief, which no longer have radioman, Chief Brown, and we're looking at, and he goes, Mogadishu looks nice. This beautiful coastline, white buildings, plaster buildings, and that, it looks beautiful. And he's like, yeah, I was here in the 80s, it was a wonderful place. Well, about a mile from the shore, it didn't look so beautiful anymore. All right, it was a mess. And long story short, we executed our mission, and unfortunately, basically, the way it works is you got a ship, and the LSD is hollow. All right, it's full of hovercraft, so you sink it just enough to kick them out the back door. And you go along the coast, kick them out the door, and you make a left, port side if you want to do that. You make a left and leave. And so we kick these guys out at 04 dark 30 in the morning. And there's an amount of time where they have to find their way to the beach. And they're in a different kind of vehicle, not the hovercraft yet. And as we're looking back to the stern, you're all watching, and all these flashes are taking place. I'm like, what is going on? And you get on the radio, and like, are you guys taking fire? What's going on? And so now think about where you guys were on December 9th, 1992, watching TV. Well, it's because the reporters were there. So here we are now in a very media-oriented world, and we find out basically these Marines land, and there's photographers, and everybody's there. And it really, so as a young lieutenant, who wants to fight the good fight, you're like, what is going on? What is happening? And so onward it goes. So we had 3 ships there on the 9th. Christmas Day, walking on the deck, and there's 26 ships from all over the world. There's an Indian frigate parked right, anchored right next to us. The coastline of Somalia has a really 2.5 knot current, so everybody's nicely organized and with the current pushing them along. And so, in another moment there where you just stand there and go, wow, here I am, and I got the world around me, and I got beer. So as time goes on, we do our different operations. The clock is ticking. It's 50 days. Well, no, it's about 45 days in. Now we get this message from the other ships. Hey, can we buy some of your beer?
No way.
And this is like 1 in the morning, and I say, denied. I'm on watch. I say, denied. And the next day, I don't know, 9 or so in the morning, on the PA system, you hear, Lieutenant Czarnik, Captain's cabin, which is not always a good thing. You gotta go to the cabin. And so he's like, so Mike, how was your watch last night? Oh, fine, sir, no problem, all good. It's like, did you talk to any other ships? Oh yes, yeah, I did. And they wanted to buy the beer, and I said no. And he's like, they're senior to us. And I'm like, well, they had their chance. So, as it turns out, the Canadians were there too, and they had a supply ship, and they had a lot of Moosehead beer. So the other ships ended up getting their beer from the Canadians, which turned out to be better than our Budweiser, I will say that. And eventually we got to 55 days, and we have what's called a Steel Beach picnic. So we had 2 flight deck helicopter landing spots after the ship, and so that's where we had picnics and did all kinds of things. So from there, one of the things I wished I had a chance to do was get underway one more time. There's just this, like you hear this fan going right now, these subtle sounds, there's a hum. Every ship has a hum. It's a unique kind of hum. And if that hum stops, there's a problem. Someone screwed up the electricity. The engine shut down or whatever. But there's this comfort, and where you learn to sleep with noise, this background noise. And there's just something about it, standing on the bridge, feeling the wind, looking at the stars. I mean, we sailed through rainbows and rainbows on the side of the ships. It was just amazing. So anyway, as time went on, we did different things with the ship, and then it came to decide, okay, where am I going next? And they wanted to put me on a cruiser in Hawaii, which sounds great, but it had just got commissioned, and it was going to do the same old that we just went through, lots of training. And so Cheryl and I talked at the time, and and she supported me whatever way I wanted to go. There's no doubt there. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm sick and tired of the media, because you can't do anything. We couldn't do anything in Somalia unless the media was there, and that kind of leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. And then just going out to sea, it was gone 9 months, at that point. And so we decided not to. And that's how I joined the reserves out in San Diego. And ultimately, it was in '93 when that took place, as you can see in the program, and started the naval career that way in the reserves. It was a bad time in the economy. And so, as it turns out, we decided to come back here, because California was #1 in unemployment. Guess who was #2? Illinois. Yay, good choice. So again, past had to change, and so after continuing to do some interviews and not getting a job, I just went to a temp agency, and as it turns out, I put something on my information of qualifications about this database program I learned along the way in the Navy, and Ameritech calls, says, hey, we want you. And so my career at Ameritech started as a contractor. So here I am, I got a double E, successful naval officer, and working like a contractor, and a little hit to the ego, I gotta say, it was not easy, but anyway, some things, as Garth Brooks' song, sometimes God doesn't answer the prayers for a reason, and so again, you're in the company now, you can see what's going on, and this young man, Dan Springer, at one point did interviews and hired me, all right, and so thank you for that. And it began my phone company career, because as you know, companies continue to evolve. Rick back here, worked with Rick way back when, doing video conferencing stuff, and still in the reserves, you go places. And as time goes on, Ameritech and AT&T eventually came to light through other companies, and I have great folks like Jim, Akif, Tom, miss anybody? There you go. Lou, sorry, right here in front of me, Lou. So, now you have a new family. And then I met Penny along the way, and Mike. So they're my new Navy, new family that would see me come and go and talk about something. Jim here was my next boss and gave me that chance to move to director, so thank you. And it just goes from there, faster and faster. And as I told you, Evan, as you go through high school and you go to college, life just never gets slow. And next thing you know, it's like, okay, here's 15 years past high school. So anyway, a lot happens, and over time I started to make new friends, and Jeff's been my buddy since since second grade, and Jeff came down from Minneapolis. His parents, I've known them forever, whether they're hosing mud off us like Scott's mom did with Ralph, somehow you just always end up muddy somewhere. But you have friends and coworkers that essentially are like family, right? So time moves on, and Evan, 96, was born. Wonderful moment, for us, and blessed for life. There's no doubt there. Then along the reserves, you meet all the folks that Vince, we were talking about, the Ancient Mariners, a bunch of us guys. My good friend Karsten here, and Bianca, but Karsten is with the German Navy, so his uniform looks a little different. overseas, when we go to different NATO things, we met. And we had a chance to see a lot of things, participate. And, you know, it's one thing in the Navy to be part of a U.S. environment. But when you start working with the foreign nations, it just changes it. You know, first of all, they're not much different. You know, we still deal with the same craziness. You know, we just do things a little bit differently. And I've met wonderful folks. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time and coming all the way to Chicago for this event from basically the Hamburg, Germany area. So if anybody took German in high school, there's your chance to practice again. They are ready. And so Djibouti, you know, what's interesting in Djibouti is it's officially a non-kinetic environment. So harm's way isn't necessarily like Iraq, right? But boy, you have all the barbed wire and layers of defense, because we're only a few clicks away from Somalia. They just always end up near Somalia for some reason. And so I was there to help out in the planning organization, and again, start to meet, you know, different people. We went over there working for the Admiral and, you know, doing different things. I bought my Rosetta Stone Swahili because I was going to be working with Kenya a lot. And, you know, our goal in Africa is, and like many countries, is called capacity building. So the idea is to help train them to be able to do whatever themselves. And so I was all excited to go and support Kenya for this big exercise. Well, as it turns out, they finally got to the point they could do it themselves with Uganda, Tanzania, etc. So I ended up not spending as much time there. But what was funny is along the way, my boss says, "Hey, Czarnik, just want to let you know you're on a short list." Short list? Yeah, I'll tell you if it gets short. Okay. So a week goes by. Hey, the list got shorter. You're still on it. Okay. And then he comes back again eventually and says, "All right, the list is really short now, and you're the guy." What does this mean? It's like, well, you're going to Ethiopia, and you're going to work for the U.S. ambassador to the African Union. The other guy that's supposed to be there broke his leg. Oh, okay. And so, like many of us, we all have that kind of stereotypical view of what the Department of State is like, the government. And, all right, we'll see how this goes. And I'm the military advisor. You know, and there's one of the things, we have two ambassadors in Ethiopia. One is to Ethiopia, and his name's Ambassador Yamamoto at the time, and he was a descendant of Yamamoto. Just amazing, an amazing individual. I, on the other hand, worked for one of the appointed people. She was nuts. Oh my gosh. Every time I introduced myself to someone from another country, and I worked for this I'm sorry. Every time. So anyway, getting the experience there of working with different embassies and that, because as it turns out, it was a project management job. Because you had Darfur in Sudan, and so a lot of efforts were for all these different nations in Africa with the African Union supporting the African Union, not the UN, to do peacekeeping there. And so you'd go to these meetings, and again, now learning a little bit more about international countries, you know, different countries and how they handle things, we quickly discovered that they do a lot of talking and not doing. All right, we're a Type A kind of country, and there's a couple more, the Germans, Brits a little bit, and you go to these meetings and they would just talk and never make a decision. It just drove me nuts. You know, it's like, okay, we got to take this battalion from Rwanda and we got to train them, equip them, pay them, and fly them to Darfur until they do their job. Well, that took a while. And eventually the ambassador says, hey, I'm going to try to, and the EU is in charge, I should say that. EU is in charge of this council. And so she's like, I'm going to make a play, and we're going to take over. Okay, ambassador. I didn't think she had a snowball's chance. And then somehow she pulled it off. So she's like, okay, we're in charge. Now you're in charge. Oh, thank you. You know, first month there. And so for my AT&T friends, broke out a spreadsheet, said, okay, here's what we're gonna do. All right, so we got to equip someone, there's a column, training, this. And so I started running these meetings and say, okay, who's signing up to pay these guys? Only the Brits could pay. The different countries have different rules. The United States, we can't pay another country's military, but the Brits would. So they signed up to pay. Another one signed up, hey, we'll buy them weapons, we'll buy them uniforms. NATO, we'll fly them in. And we got this big spreadsheet and got things going. So it was an entertaining job, to say the least. And then there's all the drama of my crazy ambassador and her staff thinking, or she's thinking her staff's, stabbing her in the back, and there's a collusion, and I need to tell her what's going on. I'm like, oh, jeez. So anyway, fun stuff. So after that, come back, and my Navy career continues. NCAGs is one of the units of many, and I've got some notes here, but it's been an amazing career, and I can't thank all of you guys for taking the time to be here. All of you are part of my life. There are some that aren't able to make it here today. I wish they could, but each group of you, my triathlon friends, and like Vince said, I came back. I could run more because I'm running in 100 and some degree temperatures. So I got a little slimmer, much better tan, and and then take care of Stoney. So that's how that began, and along the way was the new challenge of running again, do my second marathon, and then in the triathlons, and so I have all these great friends that I've met over time, and as you see in the program about these long rides, so with an Ironman, it's a 112-mile bike ride just in the middle of everything. So when you go on these long bike rides, you got nothing to do but talk and avoid cars, if that's the case, and potholes. But you take the small steps, doing a smaller race, and work your way up. And you guys were great, and supporting me through that and helping me. And it's a different kind of challenge. There's no doubt about it, and really appreciate it. So. Let me just hit a couple comments here, because I know I'm long-winded. The band's like, what the heck's going on here? So, a couple of things here. When I look back at the career, and it comes down to three fundamental things, right? Certainly my commitment to serve. There's the mission, as we call it, and my ship base. So the commitment to serve, you think about this career that you see in the document, and I put +8 because high school, college, it was all part of it. And it grows from there. I just happened to get paid for the last 30 years. Raising my right hand and taking the oath at Marquette was that first moment. And as I've told some folks, you say this oath. And the enlisted folks take the oath. There's some different words. We all take this oath to the country. And I'm sure Germany does the same. But at the time, you're just kind of saying the words. There's words that mean certain things to you, but it doesn't quite add up. And so now you've seen these words, and every time there's a re-enlistment, we're honored to do that for an enlisted. The oath is said again. And so we start to begin this career, and the oath starts to sink in, little by little. So remember, on the ship here, I'm a brand new guy, new lieutenant, and I've got the enlisted guys in my division working for me. And matter of fact, one of them had the exact same birthday as me. He's like an hour older. But our first goal is to be a leader, right? You do a little bit of practice and junior